For this video, we are going to talk about AP Learning Target 2B, which says that students will be able to demonstrate an understanding of an audience's beliefs, values, or needs. And as you can see, I'm going to kind of talk about it in context of the sophistication point that you see on your rubric. So to break that down, the sophistication point can be achieved through 4 different ways as specified on the rubric. The first one, that's right here, says that you can craft a nuanced argument by consistently identifying and exploring complexities or tensions. So we're going to talk about that one in this video. The second target says that we articulate the implications or limitations of an argument, either the student's argument or an argument related to the prompt, by situating it within a broader context. We'll talk about that one as well. And then the last two, making effective rhetorical choices and employing style, we're going to talk about a little bit later on in a later video. But our goal today is to talk about how does understanding of your audience allow you to create a more sophisticated argument, okay? So the first kind of subpoint is one way to create sophistication in your essay is to appeal to your audience's beliefs. So again, I have the language from the rubric that says crafting a nuanced argument by consistently identifying and exploring complexities and tensions. So in other words, I want to acknowledge the different beliefs that my audience might have. So I can show sophistication by mentioning those beliefs and by using some of those qualification strategies we've talked about. So I have 2 little bullet points here of how you might appeal to an audience's beliefs in an essay. Number 1 being that you might identify alternative perspectives. So that means, essentially that you're aware of diverse opinions on the subject. Let me finish my typing here. But if we are aware of diverse opinions or the opinions, those alternate perspectives that exist out there, we can anticipate those feelings. We can adjust our own speaking so that we recognize those beliefs and feelings, and that makes us a more sophisticated writer. It shows that we've kind of taken that extra step to see where our audience is in their beliefs and how our own opinion kind of fits into that. So that's one way to kind of get started in building this sophistication we want to see in our essay, is taking a minute to think about what are those other alternative perspectives and how do they relate to my own perspective. The second one I have here is to qualify your argument. Now, qualification is another learning target that we've talked about, but this is a great time to use that. We talk about that counter arguments allow us to kind of acknowledge that someone else might feel differently. Of course, with a counter argument, we then go ahead and refute it or rebut it. But really, anytime that we can kind of qualify our own argument by making these acknowledgments of other opinions, it's going to help us add to that sophistication, and like I said, really acknowledge the beliefs that might exist within the audience of whatever text we're doing. So those are kind of our 2 action steps in terms of appealing to an audience's beliefs. 1, take a minute as you look at a prompt, as you sit down and consider your rhetorical situation. What are other perspectives that might exist related to this topic, this prompt, and my own opinion on the subject matter? Kind of think of it like on the ACT prompt, they actually lay those 3 out for you and they give you 3 different perspectives. This is kind of pushing you to do that in other contexts, on other types of essays. Sit down and really think about, here's my perspective, what are the other ones that might exist out there? And then to qualify your own argument by acknowledging those. So that's kind of how we hit that first bullet point on the sophistication rubric and appeal to an audience's beliefs. Here's an example. This is from a prompt from 2014 in which it is asking if there should be a creativity class implemented in schools. And so I've highlighted an example of qualification at the beginning. It says, although the solution of creating a class in creativity seems like a good one from a superficial standpoint, further analysis of the consequences and purposes of such a class reveal that it's not the case. So obviously this part right here is where they're developing their argument. But this first part where it says, although the solution of creating a class may seem like a good one from a superficial standpoint, what they've done here is they have acknowledged that some people are going to think that it's a good idea to establish a class specifically in creativity. They're taking that minute to identify that alternate perspective, and then they're going to go in and explain why their opinion, which is the opposite, is actually the better opinion. What that does is it shows our audience that I'm not just coming up in front of you and telling you what I believe and what I think or how I think something should be done, but I'm actually taking the time to think about how you might feel about it, and I'm going to acknowledge that I have thought about it as well. So it kind of builds my own credibility as the speaker, but again, it adds that sophistication because I've thought about the complexity of the argument, okay? So the second part of this and the second kind of criteria for that sophistication point is that you're able to articulate the implications or limitations of an argument by situating it within a broader context. So this one, we're talking about how do you appeal to an audience's values, okay? Our learning target, again, is demonstrating understanding of an audience. And one way to demonstrate my understanding of an audience is to think about what is important to them. What do they value? What is a priority in their lives? And see if there's a way that I can connect to a bigger or broader context. So what I have right here is kind of two ways to go about doing that. The first one is to just consider the so what of the topic. A lot of times when you're given kind of a prompt in a class or in a timed writing situation, a lot of the times we kind of just see the surface, especially if it's timed, right? For example, the one I always use is a few years back, there was a synthesis prompt that just asked about memorials and statues. What should an organization consider if they're going to build a memorial or statue? On the surface, it's about chunks of wood, artwork, right? It's about something pretty concrete and simple, which is a statue or a memorial, whatever that looks like. If I was to take that and think about the so what, I'm going to try to connect it to an audience's values. So in this case, I might talk about how some communities value a sense of history. People value legacy and leaving something behind. People value preservation. Those are all values: preservation, legacy, history. Those are things that an audience might prioritize. Those are things that might be important to an audience. So if I can kind of take my topic and on the surface level, whatever that is, make some jump to a bigger so what, that adds sophistication to my argument, because again, it shows I took that one extra step to point out why is this even worth talking about, okay? The next part is something we've talked about previously, is building that significance into your commentary. So we've kind of talked about how commentary has 3 steps, right? 1, I'm going to clarify any evidence I've provided, maybe explain what was said or paraphrase it. The second step, I'm going to link to my thesis and claim and kind of use it to develop my argument. And then the last piece of commentary that we don't always have time for, but that can add some sophistication, is to add the significance. So after I have established how my evidence supports my overall thesis and argument, I'm going to go step 1 further, and I'm going to connect that argument to the big picture. Again, referring to this, so what? What about the argument I developed in that body paragraph connects back to that bigger, broader context? So let's look at an example. This is from the same type of prompt as sample on the creativity, again asking if a creativity class should be offered, And it says, creative thinking is central to today's idea-driven economy and technological advancement in the face of pressing national and international issues. Our society demands the need for creativity and novelty, making it essential that young people are made aware of the concept and introduced to the appropriate application from a young age. So these first few sentences, they have not at all mentioned a class. In this case, previously I was talking about that surface level of the topic. The surface level of this particular prompt is, should they have a class in creativity? Now, if I'm going to take that further, creativity itself is already a value to some people, but I think what this person has done is they've kind of positioned it into that broader context, right? A good example is right here. It says, it's central to today's idea-driven economy, right? So essentially, they're not just talking about creativity in terms of, making an art project or problem solving. They're saying that creativity is vital. It is a value in our culture because we are an economy based on ideas. So what they've done is they've kind of looked at the question and seeing, okay, on the surface level, it's just asking me, hey, should we have a class in creativity? But they've gone a step further to think about, why isn't creativity important? Why might my audience value creativity? And making that acknowledgement is a great way to add sophistication to an argument, okay? So that's just one example of how I take a surface level prompt or question and I kind of elevate it so that it talks about something bigger and more significant, more important, something that people value, to add that sophistication. So in conclusion, what I wanted to kind of show you in this video is how you you consider and analyze your audience in order to make an argument that is more sophisticated. In our case, that's sophisticated enough to get that point. But a little quick recap is we want to make sure we're always acknowledging alternate perspectives. How might my audience feel about this? If I have a very large audience, what are all the different opinions that might exist in that room with me if we're talking about a physical audience, right? What are the various ideas and opinions someone might have on this given topic? We talked about qualification, using counter-argument, using modifiers to limit your scope or even to grow your scope, right? How do I kind of craft and tweak and, like I said, qualify this argument to make it so that a broad group of people can appreciate it and that it can appeal to their beliefs, okay? Then consider the so what. Again, why is this prompt even worth talking about? Going beyond that surface level, it's not just about adding a class in creativity. It's not just about adding statues. It's about bigger things. It's about values, right? So attributing whatever the topic of your prompt is and tying it up to an important value that people appreciate. And then the last part is adding that significance commentary, going that one step further after I've kind of developed my line of reasoning to link back to not just my thesis, but to that value and that human need that exists and that can be appealed to in my argument. So those are kind of like the 4 how-tos when it comes to drafting a sophisticated argument and appealing to an audience. As you go forward doing FRQs, essays, and things like that, these are kind of good starting points to think about, how do I take my opinion, my perspective, and elevate it by giving it complexity and thinking about it in a way that is going to best package it for an audience.